Hello and welcome to the first batch of key ship comment response videos. And what I'm going to do with these videos is something slightly different. I'm going to have the slides for the whole batch, which is going to be roughly 6 of the videos, going through that I'm recording one day. But I'm just going to, in each video, talk through the questions and comments from one. But I just thought it'd be more interesting to have them flicking around. And theoretically, they are supposed to be auto-moving on roughly every... Well, he says they are supposed to be auto-flicking on roughly every 3 minutes. He says. Roughly every 3 minutes. Or 160,000 milliseconds. So, hopefully, that is all working. And if you notice that there is a poodle wandering around, there is. He's a poodle who's intent on two things. One, his cardigan, which is here. Or rather, his fleece, his hoodie. Yes, I have a furry hoodie. For the furry beast. And he's not really supposed to be wearing it at the moment because he does get cold despite being about 90% wool. So he's not supposed to be wearing it, but he is going to keep probably agitating for it because he likes it. Also, these videos, I'm going to do something slightly different in that I'm going to go from the most recent comment back and work my way back through the comment list. Normally, I work from the first comment up, but I've got to change it around with this series. So, HMS Dreadnought. This was the first ever of the Key Ship series, and it's 31st of March 2023, which feels a disturbingly long time ago considering I'm in the same year, and this is literally being recorded in October. But we will see what are the comments. And in all these videos there'll be a link to the original video both down below and appear in as one of the options in the end screen. So if you want to go see the original video and see what I'm responding to, what points there are, please do go and follow it. Now, Josh White. Hello, Josh White. 3339. So you've got 3 threes which add up to 9 and 9. So I'm not sure if that's a play on 99, or you just fancied 339, or what? But the funny thing is, didn't Jackie Fisher always prefer the battlecruiser Invincible Act to the Dreadnought? You can read through his papers and letters, and basically till the day he died, he's always going on about how the Dreadnoughts are slow, cost ineffective, and can't have much of a global strategic impact. So the battlecruiser was the better direction to go in and whatnot. Yes. And he wasn't necessarily wrong. It's just, the battlecruiser is the better option as long as you have room to maneuver. And as long as you are sure you're going to be the fastest thing out there. If you are going to be anything less than the fastest thing out there, and you're not going to have the room to maneuver, then you don't want to be in a battlecruiser. Because a battlecruiser's entire success depends on being the fastest thing out there, so it can always dictate when and where the fights are going to be, and having the room to maneuver so it can dictate when and where the fights are going to be. So, for Britain preparing to deter/fight in the North Sea versus the Germans, it's always going to be a battleship fight. It's always going to be a battleship fight because there isn't the room to maneuver. The North Sea, whilst it's a fairly large space, is not a big enough space for you to have room to maneuver. And the moment you have air power come into involved, and you have aircraft carriers, which are the sort of mobile, how do I put this, mobile extensions of air power, and I'm talking about true air power, the ability to rearm, refuel, change pilots, all those things which you need an airbase for still to this day. But you can refuel in midair, you cannot rearm, and unless you've got a very big aircraft, you ain't changing the pilots. So that's what you need an aircraft carrier for. At that point, fast battleships make more sense. And in many ways, the fast battleship is the maturation of technology to the point to which the battleship can now make sense. The modern battleship at this point could now make sense on a strategic level. Because the trouble is with having the almighty Grand Fleet is it was a mighty, mighty force coming towards you. But it's a mighty, mighty force coming towards you, and if you're smart enough, you can get out the way or withdraw and hide from it. Whereas battlecruisers could come at such a pace that they could actually achieve something like strategic surprise. So yeah, and I agree, you can read his papers. I think I have copies of the Fisher papers around here. You can buy them on Amazon, and I tend to buy the books, but I also tend to give them to other people to use. Kind of like the Somerville paper ones, which I do show on this channel quite often, and might actually be closer to me. Nope, they're also disappeared at the moment. It's great. Have dozens and dozens, hundreds, possibly, hang on, 1,000 books in here. Not far off it. Once you include, there are sort of 5 levels, each with roughly 100, 180 books on them. Roughly. Because most of them are double stacked. At least 2 layers deep. Some of them are roughly 3, and there's some more there. So, yeah, and I still can't find the book I want. Not without waking up the poodle who's now going to sleep anyway. So, David McIntyre. If Fisher had his way, his dream ship class, small tube boiler equipped Queen Elizabeth class, with 8 15-inch 42s and 28 knots would have been built in 1913 and 14. This would have been as big or bigger a step from the earlier ships of Dreadnought herself. Certainly, of course, a major constellation around the world. I think Jellicoe would have had that as well. I think pretty much everyone in the Royal Navy wanted that. And if it hadn't been for industry telling the government, strongly making the case that small tube boilers were not reliable enough, not safe enough yet to trust with such a scenario, that is what you would have had. And a Queen Elizabeth class, which is a 28 knot class, I do not see how the R class get built at a slower speed. In fact, I almost think what happens to the R class is they might go down to 3 triple turrets, and there are triple turret designs going around time, with 1542s, and still have the boilers, but albeit be a far more condensed ship because they only have the 3 turrets, so you don't have the same sort of space necessary. You could condense it, and you could save weight that way to make up the fire, sort of make up the speed of 28 knots. I do think at that point, though, you possibly have all 8 of the R's completed and all 6 of the Queen Elizabeth's, whatever form Agincourt herself takes, completed, and those 14 ships, baseline of 28 knots, would be the basis of the Royal Navy in World War II. Chronicled. My key ship suggestion is Shinto Maru, the first purpose-built amphibious warfare vessel. A fleet of those in the IJN would have been very scary for the Allies. I think I've covered that in one of the amphibious warfare. I think I did it in one of the landing ship videos right back at the beginning of the channel. I might revisit again. I might. Andrew Reynolds. HMS Warrior should be included, of course. I think the Type 21 U-boat would be a key point in ship or boat development, as although unsuccessful, they were the first modern submarine design meant to primarily operate submerged rather than a surface vessel capable of diving underwater. They became the template for many of the post-war submarine developments. I would also include USS Ticonga or Bunker Hill for the Aegis and VLS system. I probably will be getting around to submarines. I've got plans for key ship series going on ad infinitum, because there's so much stuff you can talk about with ships, and almost any ship could be a key ship once you sort of look at it as an example and you start thinking, because you're focusing in on 20 minutes of that ship in 20 minutes roughly is what you're supposed to be doing. Supposed to be what I'm doing, 20 minutes. Says the guy whose average is about an hour for a key ships video. But I did with HMS Dreadnought, I got it done in 24 minutes, so I was close. Just keep adding in more. Paul Frisco, my key ships. Narwhal with a double hull. Submarine, yeah. Nautilus for obvious reasons. Okay. Gloire. I think I might have done the Gloire. I'm not sure if I would say Gloire forced the British response herself. I think it was the fact that the French were building Gloire. It wasn't the ship. If the British had seen the ship before before Warrior was underway and under construction, I think they might have just laughed and not bothered about it. But the idea of what France was constructing was enough for them to motivate them, for them to bring everything together and build Warrior. That's the difference. It's not Gloire. It's the idea of Gloire. It's kind of like the Burn. The idea of the French aircraft carrier is a scary thing. But once the Italians actually see the Burn, they're less bothered about actually having an aircraft carrier of their own, because they look at the Burn and just go, yep. Not worried about that one. The Flower-class sloops and their outsized influence on ship design history. Oh, they did have fun. Town-class cruiser 1910. I would argue that they're not just the origins of modern cruiser. I'd argue they're practically self-replicating. Because there has been very few other classes which the Royal Navy have turned around and got a message and gone, can we just check the list quickly, because I'm not sure if this is one of ours or not. And we've got a cruiser there? You sure? You sure we've got a cruiser there? Did you send it? No. Did he send it? No. How long have they been there and who sent them there? Does anyone remember? No. I'm still surprised that in World War II we didn't find town-class cruisers fighting at various points. Why 1910 town-class cruisers fighting at various points around the world. Going, hello! Yes, we're still here. You lost track of how many there were and you didn't order us all scrapped. Or to return home to be scrapped. We've still got the same cruise on we had on 20 years ago. How? It just wouldn't have surprised me, honestly. Now, the French ship Magenta, which I believe was the first ironclad ram. Yeah. You do admit, Paul, that you're having difficulty identifying the first modern ship or boat that was armed with a ram. That's because it gets interesting, as first of all you need to define what is a ram versus a ram-strengthened bow. And the fact that I have even using that phrase tells you that some people had some ideas. And some bows were not listed as being ram strengthened, but are ram strengthened. And it just gets fun. It gets fun. It really does. It really gets fun. Naval architecture. I don't know. Cute boy. Sorry. Talking to... I got a paw, so I knew what the response was. Abercrombie-class monitor. Yeah, they'd be good to do. And the French ship Invincible, the first 74. And it has a nice article on USNI. And then you say you think I may have overstated the importance of Napoleon a few weeks ago. I presume you mean the ship. The experiment rather than the Emperor, who I would never overstate the importance of, and usually spend half my time going, yeah, he really wasn't as good as the movies repeatedly make him out to. He's kind of like Sparta. He has very good PR. And that PR is very good at glossing over the issues he has. Sparta is this sort of towering strength of a nation in image of people. But now you look at it and go, yeah, you tended to not be that good at actually winning wars, other than a short period, and you tended to be only good as long as you didn't annoy the Macedonians. So you really weren't the big hard man of your area, because the moment you annoyed the really big hard men of your area and actually caused them to come to you, they crush you. Without even barely a flex. It's not even... The thing is, when the Spartans get crushed by the Macedonians, They don't even, the Macedonians don't even send their best generals. They don't even send their best troops. They send their C team, reserve. It's quite distressing if you're the Spartans. So it's kind of like the difference between, I don't know. You always hear some various dictators in modern times flexing about how powerful and how strong they are, and how capable they are, and how their military is amazing. It would be like, and I could see actually America managing to do this. It would be like America sending their, not even their guard. Try and think of the smallest, weakest, most under, how do I put this, under personnel strength guard formation that they have. So definitely not anything Texas or Ohio. I know exactly the reputations of the Ohio National Guard and the Texan National Guard. I do know exactly what they have got up to in the past. And probably not the Virginians. And basically sending them with limited support from anything else. And then just, they would of course, with the tech and everything they have available, and the training they have had, even though they are not special forces, not anything at the sort of the top elite, wrecking it. It's what happens. Sparta was it was a power in its day, in its region, but it was not the major power. And basically, it was one of the powers which got to play around. As long as the major power didn't have any problems caused by it. If the minor powers caused the major power problem, it's gone. And it's, like Napoleon is for liberty, apart from if you could be a slave on plantations. Anyway, Carl Gosford, I would say the Soviet Koma, the Whiskey and Echo classes SSG and N are also notable first. Yeah, but they're also a bit of an interesting story to get into. And again, yes, I do need to do a submarine section of the Key Ship series. I do. I do admit I do. Can I get to the mouse, please? Okay. No, of course not. It's far more important that you lick my chair. So, 96831. Low. Battlecruiser HMS Hood would really be a key ship, given you can argue that she shows the blurring the Dreadnought battleships and battlecruisers into fast battleships, even though Hood is not a fast battleship. Well, I'm going to go through the comments between you and Jevons, and then I'm going to respond. Jevons UK, G3 is clearly no longer of the lineage of the armoured cruiser. Hood is clearly a turning point, but she's last line, not the start of a new one. Nice ignorant. Yeah, technically Hood was never meant to be the last battle cruiser. Jevons UK might be the last armoured cruiser. Okay, please don't take this the wrong way. But I think the problem you have with that is that you're not seeing, A, the generation of battleships she would have been built with, because the British don't build that generation of battleships. And it's kind of like when we're talking about the G3s, and people go, oh, that was a fast battleship. No, the British are building a battleship. It's not a fast battleship, but they're building a battleship. The G3s are the battle cruiser equivalent. And the point that needs to be got across, possibly, and possibly I've failed to make this strong enough in the past, is that just because the battle cruiser of this generation is far stronger than a battleship of the previous couple of generations, or the battleship which didn't exist in the Hood era, and so we don't know what it would have been, doesn't make it a fast battleship. Because what are the people who are designing it designing? They are designing a battle cruiser. That is what they are setting out to do. That's what's going through their head. Look at the internal architecture. Look at the internal framing, the internal structure. It is still very much towards the battle cruiser end of the spectrum, not the battleship end of the spectrum. And if we have this sort of spectrum set up, let's say battle cruiser and this end invincible style battle cruiser, 2 words from the armor cruiser sort of development thing with just an all dreadnought, all guns, etc. To battleship, and I'm talking most battleship thing you can have in its sort of timing. You have got in the middle, you've got battle cruiser, 1 word, and you've got fast battleship. I think battleship was on it, yeah. Fast battleship. And yes, they are moving towards each other. And yes, there is a point in the middle where theoretically they could cross over, and one can, they can move up and down the spectrum. But again, it's what is the mission profile you're looking for? Are you designing the G3 to fight in the battle line? No. She's not going to be a battleship. She's designed to be a heavy ship which can go around the world, which can beat up all other battle cruisers, which can act as a fast escort for fast groups, and sort of the center point on, but also be a surface raider and all the other missions which the Royal Navy needs a battle cruiser for. And the reason the British are building battle cruisers is because of the mission profile they're looking for, which is commerce protection and commerce warfare. So the G3 was not a fast battleship. I'm sorry, it wasn't. We can go. You can go. Well, look at the armor. Look at this, and I agree. It's got good armor. But then, look at the N3. And if the British had been building a fast battleship, they would have called it a fast battleship. They would have been building. There is a whole discussion which goes on around those designs in the 1920s over whether you should follow the Queen Elizabeth step, which was, let's be honest, a step towards the concept of building a fast battleship, and if they had been small tube boilers, would have been a fast battleship, because that's what they were a step towards. And there's a step, or battle cruiser. And the whole thing is, the British have gone through World War One and have gone, what we really need is a solid battle line made up of battleships, which we're less worried about the top speed of, because they've got to bring all the rest with them, and are basically going to be the firm base of impending doom, and battle cruisers to do all the high-speed duties. You also have the fact of who's in charge at this time. The person in charge of the Royal Navy, the First Sea Lord, is David Beatty. And Beatty cannot fundamentally, constitutionally accept any criticism of the battle cruisers, because that means it might be criticism of him. His ego is that big. So building fast battleships and designing fast rather than battle cruisers would have been implied criticism in his mind. You can see this because there is the problem when they start talking about making things like the things like making the Nelson Rodney faster. I don't want you to chase me. Stay. Thank you. I have to watch my hand now with the camera. So, I know where you're coming from. And by the way, that facial expression was because I put my arm down on my chair, which was still damp from someone licking it earlier. Not anything on any critique of people. Just in case. But, no. And I know I get into this discussion a lot with people, and people are going, oh, well, this is a fast battle. That's not. No. And I can tell you when the fast battleships start to come about. They come about in the late 1930s, when you've got the engine power density, that allows you to take sufficient armor to be considered part of the battle line. And one of the lessons of World War One, and especially of Jutland, was even if you need it really emphasized, a proper battle cruiser should be nowhere near a battle line. Now, you can argue then about the German ones. Were they fast battleships rather than battle cruisers? Because they are actually built to be second line battleships to support the battle line. That is an interesting debate. Whether the German design heritage is really closer to heading towards a fast battleship because of their second line their second line duties for the battle line, whereas the British are more pure battle cruisers. That is an interesting debate to get into and is something worthwhile discussing, because they are built, even though it is supposed to be supporting the battle line and going into that and providing assistance, they actually built the battle line in mind. The G3 is not being built with that in mind. The G3 is not built for the battle line. It's not there for the discussion. So, then Andrew Cox. So which of the US battleships do you consider to be dreadnoughts, given that they stuck with the triple expansion engine? Now, Spear 87, I can't speak for him. Thank you for that. But I would just look at whichever USN battleships were able to reach 21 knots. According to Wikipedia, next class American dreadnoughts, Delawares, were able to do this. Andrew Cox. Zephyrus 87. The thing about turbines is that speed is sustainable. Triple expansion engines can only manage a short dash. Zephyrus. 6 months ago, but this was an edited response. One of the Delawares did have turbines, the other used vertical triple expansion, but was known to sustain high speeds for longer than the other VT ships, 24 hours plus. I can't remember details, but it is elaborated on the Wikipedia article. It is. But what you might note is that actually I have answered this question, because not long ago, I think, and not long ago is possibly longer than I thought it was, because I'm currently scrolling through the list and going, I thought it was more recent than any of these. USS North Dakota, yes, actually, it's the 11th of September 2023. The USN's first true dreadnought. And yes, that is the first true one as far as I'm concerned, because the dreadnought definition does involve the turbines. Not just the speed of the turbines, because it's about moving upon generation. It's about that power density that comes from turbines versus vertical triple expansion engines. But saying that, you can't really call the American ones, which have triple expansion engines, to be semi-dreadnoughts. They're not really that. So they are something. They are. It's probably easier to just call them dreadnoughts than go put an asterisk next to them. But I wouldn't necessarily call them true dreadnoughts, because a true dreadnought has to have turbine engines to be that. Because the dreadnought's big leap forward wasn't its speed even, really, although 21 knots is lovely. 21 knots is great, it does give you an advantage over people's battle line, but it's not a massive jump of speed. It's the power density, etc., that comes from turbines, which allows armor, etc., and size and shaping, which allows them to be the shape and the format they are. Okay. Gem UK. Dreadnought is clearly a massive sea change in ship design, but from a structural point of view, is she much different from Lord Nelson's? The speed of her construction suggests to me that she was not, but is that the case? Yep. She's not that much different, really. She is just as honeycombed as they are in many respects. And in some respects, as I discussed in the recent... When I'm recording this, will have recently come out, or will be coming out, video on the Lord Nelsons. She is... Well, she actually has slightly less armor than them. They have slightly thicker armor. Admittedly, her armor covers slightly more area, and she has, therefore, more of it, but they do have slightly thicker armor, slightly heavier armor. Richard Cutts, 196. I would say that the 12-inch Dreadnought as designed was evolutionary. Your proposal for 15, 14-inch guns would have been revolutionary. First, because the cost of the ship's guns and infrastructure would likely have kept anyone else from building significant numbers of their own versions at least 3 to 5 years. A ship like that would have been an effective counter-argument to accusations that Dreadnought placed the RN on even footing with other navies. If you're going to make your battle line obsolete, you're better off with a big change. That is the point I would make. And Ryan Bruce comes forward as 5 triple 14-inch turreted Dreadnought is just hilarious. Cruel, but hilarious. Every navy in the world worth a damn would be absolutely crack themselves when enough force to reach Albert. Yeah. Basically, the thing is, the British could have done it. They have a 14-inch 45 wandering around this time from Ellswick. It's about the same time, it's about capable, but the thing is, it's not under production, and as I would make the point in Lord Nelson's and Dreadnought, they're going with the conserved option, but also going with the off-the-shelf option. Dreadnought is the most conservative leap forward ever known to mankind, really. And sort of great leap forward, but it's the most conservative one because they're going with the off-the-shelf turret set, which is what leads to some of the interesting issues which comes out later. Because I know in some of the videos I got coming up to discuss, there's discussions, actually questions on this, comments on this video. There's discussions about the degrees of fire, i.e. versus forward turret. And the trouble is, it wasn't something you really had to think about in things like Northern Elsas, etc., where you put sights in, etc. But it is something you have to think about as you go further on in development of battleships. There are also interesting discussions as... how do I put this? When I get into that, I'll explain it more. When I get to that point. But yes, 5 triple 14-inch guns would have probably... let's put it this way. That would have been a very convincing argument to most navies that you cease to matter. For the German Navy, there would be, for the Kaiserlich Marine, going, we're going to put 11-inch guns on it. Really? You have 11-inch guns. We have 14-inch. But ours are really long, really good 11-inch guns. They are. But ours are 14-inch. And by the way, we're carrying... We have 15 of them. That's not really fair. I think the Americans would have probably been actually the quickest to be able to respond. I think the Americans would have been. But there again, for the if you start as your baseline of Dreadnought is a 24 knot 14-inch gun ship, if that's suddenly the Dreadnought baseline, you've changed everyone's markup, because now the American ships coming in, even with their 12-inch guns and their triple expansion engines, they are just not going to qualify. No one's going to look at them and go, ah, yes, that's a Dreadnought as well. They're going to look at them and go, no, it's nowhere near that. That's 24 knots. It's just, you're going to have to jump up that much. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of ships get paused for major redesign or cancelled altogether for redesign. Actually, after I wonder if the RN had the infrastructure to support a 14-inch gun battleship long enough to make over for 23 knots. It might be required to develop a quad turret and build a 4x14 14-inch for 16 gun ship with 2 super firing turrets at each end. Same as one of the proposals for the French Leons. Speed of development would require the sort of construction in construction triple turrets to be used. In construction triple turrets to be used. Plus, because they did have triple turrets on their construction in design. Plus, you'd probably be talking about something the size of the Queen Elizabeth's, and there are yards that could do that at the time. Remember again, it's likely only one would be ordered to begin with. Richard Curtis, I was considering the reason that the French went to the quad turret was that they wanted to add more firepower, but their infrastructure precluded building larger hulls. I suspect that the RN might go the same route in an attempt to keep the budget under control, since the Liberal government wanted to cut down naval spending and use the money for social programs. Yes and no. They do want to cut down spending. One interesting thing about the Liberal government is they make a big fuss about wanting to cut defence spending to put the money into social programs. A, they don't put that much money into social programs. They really don't. And B, they don't cut defence by that much. They just make a big thing of it. And that causes issues like, instead of building 2 dreadnoughts when they should have done, they built only 1 to test the concept, when you're actually you should build 2 ships to test a concept. There's a reason you should build 2 ships as well, because if it has major problems, that could be the fault of the crew, or just a faulty build, versus if it doesn't, versus it might actually be the design, and you learn that if you have to build 2 ships. Especially in a period when you don't have the computer-aided design and testing that we have today. So before anyone gets too annoyed with me and goes, oh, you're just wasting money you're in the hock of the defense industrial complex and all those things. No. Think about it, and it's a level of technology they have in the 1900s. They don't have any of the computer testing. They can look at things on paper, which they draw out, but that's it. So the only way you can do testing is to physically build it and test it. So if you build only one ship and there are issues, you don't know whether those issues are due to build quality, or due to the design, or due to the crew. Whereas if you build two ships, you're usually able to rule out 2 out of 3 options, thanks to the information of the ships. Jacob, W5570. So, when will you show us a super firing triple gunned, long and narrowed, faster HMS Dreadnought in UAD? I think I've already done it this year. As an engineer, I can't help myself to point out that WD-40 is not a lubricant, but a solvent. So if you want to unsqueak your chair, you're better off using some real penetrating oil. I would agree, but the main reason my chair squeaks, I have often decided, is because someone, and I'm not going to point out who, someone licks it, and the lick causes issues. So, usually I'm using WD-40 to get what is in effect dried off lick off it. So yes, whilst I know it's a solvent, not a lubricant, some actual grease is occasionally applied, but the trouble is, then then both of the somebodies who occasionally lick things both want to lick my chair, because both for some reason really like the taste of grease. And people come up with various ideas about what I should use and suggestions, but the thing is, I don't want to use anything in the house which they might lick, which might actually hurt them. So I use a grease which is safe, or rather a lubricant which is safe. But the trouble is, it's safe, but also something they like the taste of. HMS Verdun. This might sound like a silly question, and this is a whole discussion again between him and Jevons. Jevons did comment on a few times on this, and I'm glad he did, because it was good comments. I presume it's him. I'm sorry if that's presuming things, but I according to YouTube, my viewership is majoritively male, so I do tend to make that assumption, unless told otherwise. Now, this might sound like a silly question, and I know it is a bit technical with international patents and all that, but did every ship with Krupp armour back in the day have to pay Krupp and Harvey before that? Or is it one of those cases where people invent a process very similar to, but not exactly the same way, to the armour produced by the companies, which made them, and it was just a standardised name, like, for example, Hoover, Velcro, Coke for products? Jevons, my understanding is all a bit of both. Krupp armour process was licensed by other companies, but then they sought to vary the process so not at all Krupp armourers are equal, but they are not quite the same vacuum cleaner being erroneously called Hoover either. H for done. That was what I meant with the whole brands taking names incorrectly. Presumably they stopped paying the royalties come World War I, despite some of the claims about Mauser being paid. Don't know if that one's true, because what the Germans going to send, because what the Germans are going to do, send the High Seas Fleet to make the British fleet comply or sue in Admiralty Court. Jones UK. Some early dreadnoughts use triple expansion engines because of the vast cost of licensing Parsons turbine designs until Curtiss turbines become viable. And no idea if it was a royalty deal or if one of the with few of the Krupp posts. Okay, it's actually not the vast. I'm going to answer on his reverse order. It wasn't the vast cost of licensing Parsons which was the issue, and you can tell that by the fact the Americans actually end up using Parsons for a couple of their ships. It's because a lot of senators didn't like buying engines built elsewhere. And eventually you get Curtiss into it, but they do a deal with Brown, who are already working on turbines, and it's interesting. The whole turbine system, development system, is the reason there are multiple companies in the UK, and they all have branches in other countries or deals going on. It's very interesting. Again, most of the German production of ships would not have been possible without British engines. That is one of the joyous things about the German High Seas Fleet in World War I. One of their big issues with keeping their ships going was having spare parts for their engines which were built and designed in Britain. Yes, a lot of them have Parsons turbines. And whilst those are manufactured mostly under license in Germany, they are not all parts were manufactured in Germany, because one of the methods the Parsons had for keeping control of these things was to make sure they provided certain key components that otherwise you would need such specialist engineering gear to build. It would be incredibly difficult to build. But those key components do also wear out occasionally. I'm not saying that was part of the Parsons business model, but it did work rather well. Now, as for the armor system, you are right to an extent. When we talk about Krupp armor, Harvey armor, we're talking about a process, we're talking about a theme, in many ways, of how we produce armor. Not all armor is created equal. True. And some of that's down to the ingredients used and the impurities that introduced, but some of it's down to the variance of the process used. And that is the advantage, because if there's a variance in the process enough, that can create a difference. And a difference can be advantageous. So, at one point when they were, I think it was, whose testing was it? It was the Japanese, I think, were doing some testing on armor, deciding on whose armor they wanted for their ships when they were building Brigade. They did some testing, and they decided that actually the best Krupp form armor wasn't supplied by Krupp. It was I think it was the Austrian manufacturers, but it was not. It wasn't Skoda. It was the other ones who I always have trouble pronouncing the name of. But I think that was it. But please don't hold me to this, because that's going from memory. I need to look up my notes. But that's a good example of what's sort of going on. Michael Cooch. With Fisher wanting forward firing, I can see him agreeing to super firing turrets and wing turrets. And if he's stuck with twin turrets, that still gives him 8 guns forward and 10 gun broadside. Triples gives you 12 and 15. I'm still good. Now, this is where it comes up. Germans UK still gives 6 forward. British super firing guns can't fire within a 30 degrees or lower turret. Now I asked the question, where did you hear that? Because I was going, well, they can fire within 30 degrees lower turret. I know there's an advisory about doing it in peacetime because it can cause damage to the ship, but that's kind of like the firing across deck thing with your wing with your sort of the guns in those positions, the offset wing guns. You don't do it in peacetime because it causes a lot of damage and a lot of cost, and frankly, you don't need that in peacetime. But in wartime, you do what you need to do, and you deal with the problems later. Calvin Gasberg, Germans UK, British super firing guns can't fire in 30 degrees lower turret. If that was the case, A, B, wing and Y turrets, and if I can fire in chase, when you keep the target at 11 or 1 o'clock, to mix aerial terminology, much better. Yeah, well, that is an advantage, but Jim UK, no, good question. No idea on the original source, but I have come across bits and pieces on this with no obvious origin. However, Naval Weps for the BL 15-inch 42 Mark I has a footnote which states, with the exception of just Hood and Vanguard, super firing turrets on these ships as built could not fire within 30 degrees of the axis because the blast effects would have penetrated into the lower turrets through the open sighting hoods. The 4 ships given major rebuilds during the 1930s replaced these hoods with sliding ports, and so could now fire on the axis if necessary. From examination of photographs taken during World War II, it would appear that this problem was not corrected on the unmodernized ships. As for an example of this, in 1944, the non-reconstructed HMS mounted 20mm Oricon air guns atop A turret, which were thus located directly below the muzzles of B turret, which implies that she could not fire B turret on a forward bearing. The 15-inch Mark II turret manual delay details safely stops to transverse, which had to be manually overwritten, includes that last 10 degrees of train and plus 30 degrees from centerline for B and X. Okay, I'm going to go through all the comments and I'm going to answer this one. Jones, you get interesting. I think this is going to require a video, and I think it will require a video. I don't think I've done it yet. Remind me if I have, but I think it will require a video. But I will also attempt to answer it in the comments. But please note, I will go into more detail in a video I will do at some point, probably during the Christmas period. Jones UK. Parks has done some stuff on the blast shape and overpressure in real life. My copy's at work though. At work. Jones UK, Dreadnought project page for HMS Tiger states, except her A turret was unique in the Royal Navy, having its layer sighting scopes in a turret faces of horizontal periscopes in effort to avoid blasts from superfiring B turret. Then my response was, it's one of the interesting things, because most of what I've read says these requirements were more to do with training and practice, to prevent exercise damage in peacetime, rather than something that necessarily followed in wartime, when they would often be firing under director control and would batten down hatches. However, certainly was an issue if firing under local control. As said, I think this deserves a video, hence my request for sources, so I can check exactly what they say. Jones UK, sounds like another case of historians messing up history. Probably not. But it's probably a case of historians quoting from what is written down. And again, some of the stuff that's written down is written down as your rules, but there's the, how to put it, the institutional knowledge and understanding that in wartime, we do what we need to do, and we'll fix it later. We're not going to write that down, because we don't need to write that down. I'm out with the kids at a Milestone Museum, but I'll check Campbell, Naval Weapons of World War II and Freeman Weapons of World War I when I get a chance. And then, response later, do you think you could cover the all-angle loading system of 1542 as to whether or not the issues were ever fixed? I think a whole video on those guns would be suitable, but as said, I have in other videos, I have got a plan for a year of guns to go through an in-depth into them and gun construction, and there are certain things I would like to do, like get some videos of centrifugal casting and those sort of things. So we'll see if it's going to be Christmas time or if it's going to be an earlier video, or rather a year of the gun video. Jones UK, Campbell and Freeman don't seem to mention it, but D.K. Brown's Grand Fleet warship design developments has Conqueror, and the after two turrets were super firing, but X turret could not fire within about 30 degrees of the stern because of blast effects on lower turret through the siding hoods. Hood in 1932, she had an improved design without siding hoods, and the upper turrets were capable of axial fire. Neptune, the after two turrets were super firing, but X turret could not fire within about 30 degrees of the stern because of the blast effects on the lower turret through the siding hoods. Sorry for lack of page numbers, but this digital copy doesn't match the prime printed editions. Also in R.A. Burt, 1919 to 1945, this provision sighting ports and turret face instead of in the hoods in the crown, as in all earlier classes, allowed direct end-on fire by the super-firing turrets for the first time in the Royal Navy. This had previously been impractical because of blast effects on personnel at the hoods and lower turrets. From Freeman, 1906 to 1946, this and all the other British battleships turrets prior to Hood had 3 sighting hoods, 2 for gun layers and 1 containing 2 sights in the middle of the trainer to point at the turret. At least in theory, the gun layers were expected to maintain continuous aim on target, using increasingly responsive hydraulic controls. The use of sighting ports just above the face of the turret made it impossible to superimpose turrets. However, once periscope sights were introduced in HMS Neptune, the guns of an upper turret could be fired close to the axis of the lower one without disabling the turret operators. In Hood, the sights were at the front of the turret with ports in the turret face. In Nelson, the periscopes were limited altogether, but a local director sight was let into the turret, into the side of the turret. That's from Dr. David Stevens around Australian Sea Power Center. HMS Neptune comes in, this is my response, it comes in 1999. She's Dreadnought battleship number 8 and first to be built with superfiring turrets. Jones, yes indeed, Neptune and Virtual Repeat Colossus class have XY as superfiring pair rather than the flat arrangement of the Dreadnought, Battlefront and St. Vincent classes. So Freeman ceased to offer in contrast that this was a step taken in the first superfiring ships of the Royal Navy to mitigate the blast issue. Very interesting. And I think it's number 7 after Dreadnought, the Battlefront, Superb, Temeraire, St. Vincent, Collingwood and Vanguard. I read that, and I have to admit, I'll read the rest. Who knows? Jonathan's, I think we are having what's called a violent agreement, so I'm going to attempt to diffuse by explaining my maths. Dreadnought is the first, then 3 Battlefronts, Battlefront, Temeraire and Superb, take it to 4. 3 Vincents, St. Vincent, Collingwood, Vanguard, take it to 7. So she's the 8th battleship, Dreadnought battleship, the 11th British Dreadnought, including the 3 Invincible Dreadnought armed cruisers, aka battlecruisers. Jevons, it's my bad maths. I literally listed the 7 ships before it, so it courses the 8th. Yeah. Okay, so let me explain. I think what you're what we're dealing with is one of the earlier things, and it's one of the interesting things is once periscope sights are fitted in, it's not the same problem. Once the periscope sights are fitted, it doesn't become a problem as the guns are originally designed, and there's all sorts of questions. I would say on the subject of Malaya, lots of ships end up with guns being light AA guns being put on top of their turrets, including sometimes their A turrets. The thing is, as long as the people aren't up there, and as long as you aren't aiming to directly hit the light gun itself, you're probably okay. Yes, it might twist and damage it, but then you've just got to fix a 20mm Auricon. It's not really a big thing that you're going to worry about. If you need to fire there, you need to fire there. The point is, how often do you need to fire in that direction? That's a good question. How often do you need to fire directly ahead? You can avoid it, but you probably, if you do need to, you're going to do it. And worry about the consequences later. But if you don't need to, that's fine, and that's extra AA. And extra AA is always important in World War II. So that I see less of a sort of proof of point. I think what we're talking about is the evolution of turrets. And you have to remember, even in Mark 1, Mark 2, and all these other turrets, the turrets were under a constant, older ships were under a constant level of development. And yeah, when they had the hoods open and everything else and they weren't under direct control, and you fired them, you had problems. The blast effect would be an issue, so you wouldn't do that. Especially wouldn't do that in peacetime, and you would hope not to do it in wartime. But the thing is, once you develop things like periscopes that you can insert into the hoods, you do that. And then you don't need to worry about it. And that's literally what the British work through. From what I can see, there is some very sensible guidance that these things are all not great and imperfect and can be damaged. And frankly, it's cheaper and easier because in peacetime you don't need to do it. You're doing firing exercises to not do so. 30 degrees is also quite a big area. Think about that. That's 60 degrees in total. 30 degrees at the stern, you're talking about a 60-degree gap in your firing. If you think about how far the guns can fire in terms of their range of fire, if you're taking out the middle 60 degrees, you have cut out a large amount of area. 15 degrees either way cuts it down to roughly 30 degrees, and that would fit with what I've seen. So I think it's 15 degrees either way, and it's 30 degrees total. And because that would also make slightly more sense. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if in wartime that changes. In fact, I'm fairly certain in wartime that changes. In wartime, the level of risk and damage you'll take to your ship is far greater than in peacetime. In peacetime, going, yeah, we wrecked the turrets, but we were just, we hit the target, and the target was being towed by another vessel in a live fire exercise. So you have wrecked a turret, potentially injured crew, or potentially even killed crew, for the sake of hitting a target being towed by a destroyer. Yeah. That's a good way to lose your career and a good way to find yourself in a lot of trouble. However, we were under fire, the enemy was going to be crossing our T, we lined it up, and we fired straight over our bows. We were firing under local control, which meant we had the hoods open. This caused damage in forward turret, but the shells hit the target. Enemy battleship was disabled, and we survived. In A turrets, there were injuries, but no fatalities, and the gun was quickly working again. It's not nice to say, but it sounds like a very understandable conversation you would hear. So yes, I think what is happening here, and I wouldn't be surprised about it at all, and I would go and read some of those books. If you unfortunately didn't give me page numbers, but you did give me lots of books, so I have gone and tried to look through them and find the exact pages we've talked about it. And I think what they are referencing is very much best practice for peacetime and the rules and regulations which they are referencing correctly. I just think that in wartime things were slightly different. Right, Hakim, 8421. Hello. Her first night with Sun Fleet Sisters would have been awkward introductions. Our battleships. Hello, I'm Dreadnought. Dreadnought. Nice to meet you. I'm Dreadnought. Yeah. This is why I call them sovereign ships. Sovereign battleships. Because the sovereign class are really sort of the starting point. If you're going to, there are all sorts of things you can call them, but I use sovereign class as it. Although we do call the frigates which come after the Warrior as the ironclad frigates, because rather than, we call them that because, well, theoretically Gloir's the first one, so we should call them Gloire, but everyone looks at Gloire and then looks at Warrior and goes, we know which one of you would win. Easily. As in shredding it. So, yeah, we're going with ironclad frigates. Returbines, though, this is all from Hakim. You point out the effect of the height and the volume of machinery space at times, sometimes related to particular hull design features. Sometimes to propulsion or to fuel, and making a pretty good case that the uniform main battery together with oil turbines probably with oil turbines properly defined Dreadnought. It's turbines. I'd love it to be oil powered turbines, but oil power really comes in with the Queen Elizabeth class. And it should really come in with 28 knots of speed and small tube boilers, and that would have been the beginning of the fast battleship era. And I think that would have had a really interesting effect, because I think if you have Queen Elizabeth coming as fast battleships, I honestly question, I think, as I've said earlier, I think you end up with the R class being 3 triple turrets rather than 4 twins, everything to try and save money whilst also maintaining 28 knots. And I think you end up with a Hood. If a Hood in Admiral class are built, I think they're built as fast battleships, but I think they're built as 30 knot fast battleships. Rather than going for a 36 knot ship, I think they're going to build as a 31 knot fast battleship. And I think that you would see a very different Hood. But I think also you would see a very different naval treaty and a very different World War II. Because for the Americans, whilst you can sit there and go, yes, we can do a treaty agreement in British, and yeah, we're going to have 16-inch guns to the upper limit. Yeah, they've only got 15s. That's fine. How fast is our battle line? How fast is their battle line? Our battle line is 21 knots. Their battle line is 28 knots. That suddenly stops it looking like a parity scenario. Add in the British being allowed to build Nelson and Rodney, and they would definitely be built. They'd of course be built to 28 knot designs to fit in with that speed limit, and fit in with that battle force, and you have a really different scenario. You also don't have Renown and Repulse as battle cruisers. You have an entirely British fast battleship line. So you'd have possibly the 6 Queen Elizabeths and the 8 R's. So 14 ships as your fast battleships, plus whatever Admiral class is completed, if any Admirals equivalents are built, and Nelson and Rodney maybe. So you could end up with roughly 18 28 knot plus ships. That would be a fairly proficient force, especially as if they're 28 knots in that period, they're going to do anything they can to maintain their speed through refits, etc. So they'd still be 28 knots in World War II. I just think that there are certain navies which might be less comfortable with a position if they're facing a 28-knot Royal Navy. But I also think for the Royal Navy, that produces an interesting scenario because, again, for them, battle cruisers do make more sense. So yes, but if you're building battle cruisers in a world where you've got 28-knot fast battleship battle line, how fast are you going to build your battle cruisers to be? What are you going to build your battle cruisers like? Becomes a whole range of discussions. Matthew Killing, they gave up their souls or rather their guns. These are battleships. Are the two not the same thing? That's an interesting question. I'd say the guns are more like their arms. They're more like the way they reach out and touch the people. Their souls are the whole thing. But without the ability to reach out and touch, does the soul still? Without all that soul, the purpose of the soul, which the guns are, yeah, it could well be the same thing. Hello, David Cooper. Thank you. There's a whole discussion on WD-40, but, you know. A whole discussion on WD-40. I mean, about HMS Invincible, revolutionary ship or just a flop? Clearly the best armored cruiser afloat when completed, according to Jevons. Yeah, Colonel Overkill. Yeah, I can assure you your sis didn't forget. Well, as I pointed out, we now know who has the better. Oh, then from Yardwell, we now know who has the better strategic sense of family. And then my response to that was, yes, but I'm away week 2, where Mum is starting to move around more, which means Sis is now left with a mobile mother, whereas I had a largely sedentary one. So yeah, there were advantages to what was to the issues that were happening in time, to being first. There are also advantages to being the one going away first. All right. Interesting enough, when I'm recording this, we're in October, and this video is not going to come out till, well, let's see, when scheduled videos. Ooh, a scheduled video. When is it scheduled? This is going to come out on the 25th of November. Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, 25th of November. The video coming up, the last of this year's Year of Technology videos, why no more battleships? Rather appropriate for this video to be coming out before time. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and take care. Normally I finish videos with a question, and I'm going to try and keep that up. But if you could go back in time and make one change that's technologically viable at the time, i.e. you cannot go back and add lasers or something like that. You have to go and pick from the available technologies at the time, make one change to HMS Dreadnought. What would it be and why? Thank you very much for watching. Take care.